What if Arthur Morgan entered Skyrim? The gunshot echoed through the pines of the heartlands, startling a flock of ravens into the pink evening sky. Arthur Morgan lowered his Lancaster repeater, squinting through the haze at the O'Driscoll camp he'd just cleared. The bodies lay scattered across the blood-stained grass. Just another day's work for Dutch's most reliable enforcer. He sighed heavily, a weight of exhaustion settling on his broad shoulders that seemed to grow heavier with each passing month. "This life," Arthur muttered, running a weathered hand across his stubbled jaw. "Don't know how much more of it I got in me." His horse, a sturdy dappled Missouri foxtrotter he'd named Mercury, nickered softly as Arthur approached. "Easy, girl," he said, patting her muscular neck before mounting. "Let's get back to camp." But as he turned Mercury toward the east, something caught his eye. A strange shimmer in the air between two ancient oaks. Arthur frowned, squinting at the disturbance. It resembled heat rising from sun-baked earth, but more deliberate somehow, more substantial. "What in the hell?" he murmured, guiding Mercury closer. The air seemed to part like water, revealing what looked like a window into another place, a snow-covered forest utterly unlike the grasslands of New Hanover. Arthur stared, transfixed. He'd heard tales of strange phenomena from Charles and Rains Fall, spirit worlds and doorways between realms, but had dismissed them as superstition. Yet here before him was something that defied explanation. Mercury grew agitated, pawing nervously at the ground and tossing her head. "Easy, girl," Arthur soothed, though his own heart hammered in his chest. Against all better judgment, he dismounted, stepping closer to the strange portal. "I must be losing my damn mind," he muttered, reaching out a tentative hand toward the shimmer. The moment his fingertips breached the threshold, an invisible force seized him, yanking him forward with unstoppable strength. Arthur barely had time to shout before the world dissolved around him. Mercury's frightened whinny faded as the very fabric of reality tore away. He was falling, tumbling through a void of swirling light and darkness, his lungs unable to draw breath. The sensation lasted an eternity, or perhaps only seconds, before he slammed hard into frozen ground, the impact knocking the remaining air from his lungs. Arthur lay still, gasping like a landed fish, his vision swimming. When he finally managed to push himself up onto his elbows, what he saw made his blood run cold. Gone were the familiar plains of New Hanover. Instead, he found himself in a snow-blanketed forest of ancient pines, their branches heavy with ice. Jagged mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks lost in roiling storm clouds. The air was bitterly cold, far colder than any winter he'd endured in the grizzlies, and Arthur's thin coat offered little protection against it. "What in God's name?" he whispered, his breath forming thick clouds before him. He checked his weapons by instinct. His revolvers remained holstered at his hips, and his rifle was still slung across his back. Whatever strange force had pulled him here hadn't stripped him of his arsenal, at least. Small comfort in this alien landscape. Rising unsteadily to his feet, Arthur turned in a slow circle, seeking any sign of the portal that had brought him here. There was nothing, only unbroken forest stretching in every direction. "Hello?" he called, his voice sounding small against the vastness of the wilderness. Only the mournful howl of wind answered him. Survival instinct took over. He needed shelter, warmth, and bearings. The sun, dimly visible through thick clouds, appeared to be setting to his left. North, then, would be roughly behind him. Not that compass directions meant anything in a place he didn't recognize. Arthur's thoughts were interrupted by a distant roar, a sound unlike any animal he'd ever heard. It was followed by screams, human screams, coming from somewhere ahead. Against his better judgment, Arthur found himself moving toward the commotion, drawing his Lancaster repeater as he trudged through knee-deep snow. The forest gave way to a clearing where a nightmarish scene was unfolding. A massive creature, like a lizard grown to impossible size, with scales black as midnight and wings that blotted out the sky, was circling above a small group of people dressed in what looked like medieval armor. As Arthur watched in stunned disbelief, the beast unleashed a torrent of flame from its jaws, setting a pine tree ablaze. "A goddamn dragon," Arthur whispered, his mind reeling. "I've lost my mind completely." One of the armored figures, a woman with a horned helmet, spotted him at the forest's edge. "You there!" she shouted. "Run, civilian!" The dragon's massive head swiveled toward Arthur, its ancient eyes fixing on him with terrifying intelligence. It roared, a sound that seemed to shake the very mountains, and banked sharply in his direction. Arthur had faced down grizzlies, wolves, and the most ruthless outlaws west of the Mississippi, but nothing had prepared him for this. Still, when faced with the impossible, Arthur Morgan did what he'd always done. He fought. Raising his Lancaster, he took careful aim and fired. The bullet struck the dragon's scaled hide with a spark and a metallic ping, seemingly doing little more than annoying the beast. "God damn it!" Arthur cursed, working the lever to chamber another round. The dragon dove toward him, its maw opening to unleash another blast of flame. Arthur dove behind a boulder as fire washed over the spot where he'd been standing, the heat intense enough to scorch his coat despite not touching him directly. "Your weapons are useless, stranger," the horned woman called, charging forward with a sword drawn. "Stay down." The other warriors, 3 men in various states of armor, spread out to flank the creature as it landed with earth-shaking force. They moved with practiced coordination, striking at the dragon's legs and wings with swords, axes, and spears. Arthur, never one to hide while others fought, emerged from cover and fired again, aiming for the creature's eye. This time the shot found its mark. The dragon reared back, a shriek of rage and pain tearing from its throat. "The eye! Hit it in the eye!" Arthur shouted, chambering another round. The horned woman glanced at him with newfound respect, before shouting something in a language Arthur didn't understand. One of her companions, a burly man with a massive 2-handed axe, nodded and maneuvered toward the dragon's head. Arthur fired again, further enraging the wounded beast. It thrashed violently, its tail sweeping across the clearing and catching one of the warriors in the chest. The man flew through the air like a rag doll, landing in a crumpled heap against a tree trunk. Cursing, Arthur abandoned his rifle and drew his dual Schofield revolvers. He charged forward, firing both guns at the dragon's face, creating a distraction that allowed the axe-wielding warrior to deliver a crushing blow to the creature's jaw. The dragon staggered but didn't fall. Instead, it gathered itself and leapt skyward, powerful wings carrying it out of reach. It circled once, regarding the battlefield with its remaining eye, then flew off toward the mountains, its roars fading into the distance. The clearing fell silent save for the heavy breathing of the warriors and the crackling of flame-engulfed trees. Arthur holstered his revolvers, retrieving his rifle from the snow. The horned woman approached him, wiping dragon's blood from her blade before sheathing it. Up close, Arthur could see she was young, perhaps in her 30s, with fierce blue eyes and war paint streaked across her face. "You fight well for someone who's never faced a dragon before," she said, her accent unfamiliar to Arthur's ears, "though your weapons are strange." Arthur cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I reckon I'm a long way from home, and I ain't got the faintest idea where I am or what in the hell just happened." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You're in Skyrim, the northern province of the Empire, though I suspect that means nothing to you, does it?" "Not a damn thing," Arthur confirmed. One of the other warriors approached, an older man with a graying beard and a weathered face. He appeared from nowhere, Lydia, the man said, just before the dragon attacked. I saw a light in the trees, and then he was there. Lydia, the horned woman, studied Arthur with renewed interest. What is your name, stranger? Arthur. Arthur Morgan. Well, Arthur Morgan, I don't know what magic or fate brought you to Skyrim, but your arrival is timely. The dragons have returned after centuries of absence, and the land is descending into civil war. She gestured to the fallen warrior, who was being tended by one of his companions. We are stretched thin as it is. Arthur sighed deeply, feeling the beginning of a headache forming behind his eyes. Look, I appreciate the warm welcome, but I need to get back to where I came from. I got people waiting on me. Lydia's expression softened slightly. I understand, but the kind of magic that could bring a man from another world, that is beyond my knowledge. You would need to speak with the mages at the College of Winterhold, or perhaps the Greybeards at High Hrothgar. Mages, Greybeards. Arthur shook his head. Lady, you're speaking gibberish to me. You're shivering, she observed. Night falls quickly here, and the cold will kill you before you find answers. Come with us to Whiterun. We can offer you shelter, and Jarl Belgruf's court wizard might know something of your predicament. Arthur weighed his options, which were admittedly few. He was in a strange land with no supplies, no knowledge of the terrain, and apparently dragons. The cold was already seeping into his bones, and the light was fading rapidly. All right, he conceded, lead the way. As they prepared to depart, Arthur helped the warriors gather their wounded companion. The man was alive but barely conscious, his armor dented where the dragon's tail had struck him. Thank you, Lydia said as Arthur fashioned a makeshift stretcher from spear shafts and a cloak. Most outsiders wouldn't risk themselves against a dragon for strangers. I've been that wounded man more times than I care to count, Arthur replied. Always appreciated when somebody stopped to help. They set off through the deepening twilight, the warriors forming a protective formation around Arthur and the injured man. As they crested a hill, a vast landscape opened before them, a sprawling valley flanked by towering mountains with a walled city rising from the plains at its center. Whiterun, Lydia announced, following Arthur's gaze, the trading heart of Skyrim. Arthur had seen the great cities of America, St. Denis with its trolleys and electric lights, the burgeoning metropolis of Blackwater, but Whiterun was something from another time entirely. Stone walls surrounded clustered wooden buildings, rising toward a great hall perched at the summit of the hill. Smoke curled from dozens of chimneys, and even from this distance, he could see tiny figures moving along the ramparts. Looks like something out of a storybook, he murmured. Lydia gave him a curious look. It is one of our smaller holds, nothing compared to Solitude or Windhelm. Right, Arthur said, not recognizing either name. How far to this college you mentioned? Winterhold lies far to the northeast, a journey of many days, especially in winter, and High Hrothgar. She pointed to the looming mountain that dominated the eastern skyline. The throat of the world. The path to the Greybeards is treacherous even in summer. Arthur's heart sank. He thought of the gang, of Dutch and Hosea, of John and little Jack, of Miss Grimshaw and the girls. Would they search for him? How long before they gave up and assumed he'd been killed or had run off? Don't lose hope, Lydia said, seeming to read his thoughts. Skyrim is a land of ancient magic and older gods. If there was a way for you to come here, there is likely a way for you to return. I hope you're right, Arthur said, adjusting his hat against the falling snow. As they continued toward the city, Arthur noticed strange lights dancing in the night sky, ribbons of green and purple illuminating the darkness. "What's that?" he asked, nodding upward. "The aurora," Lydia replied. "The lights of Aetherius shining down upon Nirren. They are strongest in Skyrim's northern reaches." Arthur stared at the spectacle, momentarily forgetting his predicament. In all his travels across America, he'd never seen anything so beautiful. "They say the lights are the spirits of the dead, crossing over to Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife," Lydia continued, "though the college mages have more scholarly explanations." Arthur thought of all those he'd sent to their maker over the years, enemies and innocent bystanders alike. Would their spirits dance across the sky in this strange world too? The path narrowed as they descended into the valley, following a cobblestone road worn smooth by centuries of travelers. They passed farms with thatched roofs and split-rail fences, where hardy livestock huddled against the cold. Farmers eyed the returning warriors with a mixture of respect and wariness, their gazes lingering on Arthur's unfamiliar appearance. "Your clothes mark you as an outsider," Lydia observed, "and those weapons will draw attention. In Whiterun, that can mean trouble, especially with the war brewing." "War?" Arthur asked. "The Stormcloaks rebel against imperial rule," she explained. "Whiterun remains neutral for now, but tensions run high. As a housecarl of Whiterun, my loyalty is to Jarl Balgruuf alone. Housecarl, a sworn shield, a protector bound by oath to my thane." Arthur nodded, though he understood little of the politics or terminology. He'd seen enough conflict in his life to recognize its patterns regardless of the setting. Men fighting over land, power, and ideology. Some things, it seemed, were universal. As they approached the city gates, Arthur steeled himself. He'd survived Pinkertons, rival gangs, and the harshest wilderness America had to offer. Somehow he'd find his way through this strange new world, and back to his own. The walls of Whiterun loomed before him, a gateway to a land of dragons, magic, and ancient conflicts. For better or worse, Arthur Morgan had entered Skyrim. What if Arthur Morgan entered Skyrim? Part 2. Arthur Morgan awoke to unfamiliar sounds, not the chirping of western bluebirds or the distant howl of coyotes, but strange melodious calls of birds he couldn't identify. His body ached as if he'd been thrown from his horse and dragged across half of New Hanover. "You're finally awake," a deep Nordic voice said. Arthur blinked, adjusting to the light filtering through wooden slats above him. He found himself lying on a crude straw bed in what appeared to be some kind of longhouse. A large, bearded man in iron armor stood by the door. "The Jarl wants to see you as soon as you can stand," the man continued. "Says you're the strangest Imperial he's ever laid eyes on." Arthur sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in his side. His gun belt was missing, but someone had left his satchel nearby. "And who might you be?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Hrongar, brother to Balgruuf the Greater, Jarl of Whiterun. You caused quite a stir when the guards brought you in. Half dead outside the city walls, muttering about Dutch and Micah and other strange words." Arthur rubbed his beard, trying to piece together the fragments of his memory, the storm, the strange lights, the sensation of falling. And then nothing. "I appreciate the hospitality," Arthur said, reaching for his satchel. "But I need to figure out where I am and how to get back." Hrongar laughed, a booming sound that filled the small room. Back where, stranger? You're in Whiterun Hold, in the province of Skyrim." The guards found nothing on you but strange weapons and coins no merchant has ever seen. Arthur's hands found his journal in the satchel, along with his pencils and a few other personal effects. At least they hadn't taken everything. My guns, Arthur said. Where are they? The metal weapons that make thunder. The court wizard has them. Farengar is most curious about their workings. Arthur swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood shakily. He was still wearing his own clothes, his worn blue shirt, jeans, and boots, though someone had removed his coat and hat. "I'll need those back," he said firmly. "That will be for the Jarl to decide," Rongar replied, gesturing toward the door. "Can you walk? Dragon's Reach awaits." Whiterun was unlike any settlement Arthur had ever seen. Stone buildings with thatched roofs clustered tightly together, surrounding by an imposing wall. People bustled about in strange garb, fur cloaks, leather armor, flowing robes, speaking with accents Arthur couldn't place. A blacksmith pounded at an anvil outside her shop, crafting what looked like medieval weaponry. As Arthur followed Rongar up a series of stone steps, he noticed people staring at him, whispering behind their hands. His clothing alone marked him as an outsider. "What's with all the swords?" Arthur asked, nodding toward a passing guard. "You folks not invented firearms yet." Rongar gave him a puzzled look. "Firearms? You mean like fire salts or flame spells? We have those, though most prefer steel." Before Arthur could respond, they arrived at an enormous wooden structure perched at the highest point of the city. Two guards flanked massive wooden doors carved with intricate designs. "Dragon's Reach," Rongar announced proudly, "home of Jarl Balgruf and seat of power in Whiterun Hold." The interior was even more impressive, a great hall with soaring ceilings, massive support beams, and a central fire pit surrounded by long tables. At the far end, a man sat on an ornate throne, deep in conversation with a robed woman. "My brother the Jarl," Rongar said, leading Arthur forward. The Jarl was a regal man with blonde hair and beard, wearing a gold circlet and fine clothing. He looked up as they approached, his eyes narrowing as he assessed Arthur. "So, this is our mysterious visitor," the Jarl said, leaning forward. "You're a long way from home, by the looks of you." "That's putting it mildly," Arthur replied, giving a slight nod of respect. He dealt with enough powerful men to know when deference was expected. "Name's Arthur Morgan. I thank you for your hospitality, but I'd appreciate having my weapons returned." The Jarl exchanged glances with the dark elf woman standing beside him. "I am Balgruf the Greater, Jarl of Whiterun. This is Irileth, my housecarl. Before we discuss your unusual possessions, perhaps you could explain how you came to be at my city's gates, half dead and dressed like no Imperial I've ever seen." Arthur sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not sure you'd believe me if I told you." "Try me," the Jarl said. "Skyrim has seen stranger things of late. Dragons returning to the realm, for one." "Dragons?" Arthur couldn't help but bark out a laugh. "Now I know I'm either dead or dreaming." The Jarl didn't share his amusement. "Neither, I assure you. Now, your story." Arthur cleared his throat, deciding that some version of the truth was his best option. "I'm from a place called America, far beyond any land you know. I was caught in some kind of storm. There were lights, strange lights in the sky. Next thing I know, I'm waking up here." "A conjuration gone wrong, perhaps?" the Jarl asked, looking to someone behind Arthur. "Farengar, what do you make of this?" Arthur turned to see a hooded man in blue robes step forward, holding to his dismay his revolver and rifle. "Fascinating artifacts," the man named Farengar said, examining the Schofield revolver with scholarly interest. "I can detect no magical properties, yet they're clearly designed for destruction. The craftsmanship is unlike anything in Tamriel." "That's because they're not magical," Arthur said, fighting the urge to snatch his weapons back. "They're tools where I come from, common ones. And yet they produce fire and thunder, launching small metal projectiles with deadly force," Farengar countered. "The cards described your defense against the wolves. Most impressive." The Jarl raised a hand. "Whether by magic or mechanism, these weapons are clearly dangerous. Before I return them to you, Arthur Morgan, I need to know your intentions in my hold." Arthur looked the Jarl in the eye. "I have no intentions beyond finding a way home. I don't know your politics or your troubles, and I don't want any part of them." "An admirable goal," the Jarl said, "but perhaps not a realistic one. If Farengar is correct and you've been brought here by some powerful magic, finding your way back may prove challenging." The reality of his situation began to settle on Arthur's shoulders, heavier than any burden he'd carried before. If this wasn't some fever dream before death claimed him, if he truly had been transported to another world, "Then I'll need to survive while I figure it out," Arthur said firmly. "And in this land of dragons and wolves, I'd feel a sight better with my guns at my side." The Jarl considered him for a long moment, then nodded. "Farengar, return his possessions. Arthur Morgan, you may stay in Whiterun as my guest until you find your bearings, on one condition." "What's that?" Arthur asked warily. "You assist my court wizard with his dragon research. Your guns suggest your homeland has knowledge we lack. Perhaps you possess other insights that could prove valuable." Arthur hesitated, but saw little choice. He needed shelter, information, and allies if he was to navigate this strange world. "All right," he agreed. "I'll help where I can, but I should warn you, dragons aren't exactly common where I'm from either," the Jarl smiled. "Then you and most of Skyrim have something in common." He gestured to Farengar. "Show our guest to the quarters we've prepared, and begin your inquiries tomorrow. For now, I think he could use a proper meal and rest." As Arthur followed Farengar, the wizard reluctantly handed back his weapons. Arthur checked them quickly, relieved to find them intact and loaded. "I have so many questions about these devices," Farengar said. "The mechanical principles alone." "Tomorrow," Arthur said firmly, holstering his revolver with practiced ease. The familiar weight at his hip provided a small comfort in this utterly foreign world. "Right now I could use a drink stronger than water," Farengar smiled. "Then you'll find Skyrim to your liking, at least in that regard." The Bannered Mare Tavern hummed with conversation and the strumming of a lute. Arthur sat in a corner, nursing a mug of something called mead, stronger and sweeter than he expected, but not unpleasant. He'd traded one of his gold coins for local currency, finding to his surprise that the metal itself was valuable enough to secure him a purse of septims. His journal lay open before him, pencil sketching the strange scene around him. A bard singing tales of dragons, mercenaries boasting of battles with creatures called Draugr, a cat-like humanoid selling trinkets to a table of armored soldiers. Arthur had seen many things in his violent life, but nothing prepared him for the menagerie of races in this tavern alone. "You draw well," came a voice at his shoulder. Arthur looked up to see a red-haired woman in leather armor, eyeing his journal with interest. Her face bore war paint in 3 diagonal stripes across her features. "You move quiet," Arthur replied, closing his journal. "Can I help you with something, miss?" "Ayla," she supplied, sliding into the seat across from him without invitation. "They call me Ayla the Huntress, and you're the stranger everyone's talking about." The one with the thunder weapons. Arthur sighed. News traveled fast in small communities, no matter what realm they existed in. Word gets around quick. Whiterun isn't so large, Ayla said with a shrug, and you're not exactly trying to blend in. She nodded toward his clothing and hat, which stood out starkly among the medieval garb of the tavern's other patrons. Wasn't given much choice in the matter, Arthur said dryly. 1 minute I'm in my world, next I'm here. Your world? Ayla raised an eyebrow. So the rumors are true. You're not just from another province? Arthur took another sip of mead. Lady, I'm as lost as a fish in a desert. Nothing here makes a lick of sense to me. People talk about magic and elves and catfolk like it's the most natural thing in the world. Because it is, Ayla replied. But I understand feeling out of place. Even in your home, you can feel like you don't belong. There was something in her tone that resonated with Arthur. He studied her more carefully, the confident posture, the watchful eyes, the way she seemed both part of the tavern's atmosphere and separate from it. You hunt more than deer, I'm guessing, he said. A smile played at her lips. Perceptive. The companions hunt many things, some for coin, some for honor. The companions. Warriors, she explained. We take contracts, solve problems, uphold honor. Some call us mercenaries, but we're more than that. We're a family bound by battle and blood. Arthur nodded slowly. Had something like that once. And now? She asked. Arthur stared into his mead. Now I'm just trying to find my way. Ayla leaned forward. Then perhaps you should visit Jorvaska. The companions could use someone with your skills, and you look like you could use allies. I appreciate the offer, but I'm planning on finding a way back home. And if you can't, Ayla challenged. What then? Will you serve the Jarl forever, helping his wizard study dragons you know nothing about? Arthur had no answer for that. The possibility that he might be trapped here permanently was something he'd been avoiding contemplating. Think about it, Ayla said, standing. Your Vaska is the mead hall just up from the Gildergreen tree. You can't miss it. It's the upturned boat. The what now? She merely smiled. Come find us when you're ready to do more than draw pictures of a world you're now part of, whether you like it or not. As she walked away, Arthur returned to his journal, flipping to a fresh page. He began sketching the tavern's interior again, but found his pencil straying to Ayla's determined face, the strange armor she wore, the bow strapped to her back. The world he'd left behind, Dutch, the gang, the relentless pursuit of the Pinkertons, seemed increasingly distant, like a half-remembered dream. Yet in some ways, this place reminded him of the American frontier, wild, dangerous, filled with opportunity and peril in equal measure. Arthur had survived the wilderness before. He'd adapted, learned, endured. If this was to be his new reality, he would need to do the same here. Tomorrow, he decided, he would begin in earnest, learning about this realm, its dangers, its possibilities. He would help Farengar with his dragon research as promised, but he would also explore this city called Whiterun and perhaps visit these companions. If there was a way home, he would find it, and if not. Arthur closed his journal and finished his mead in one long swallow. The familiar burn in his throat was comforting, a small reminder that some experiences transcended worlds. If there was no way home, then he would have to make a new one, again, and this time perhaps he could do better than before. What if Arthur Morgan entered Skyrim? Part 3, Final. Arthur Morgan stood amid the flurry of falling ash at the throat of the world. his weathered face illuminated by the eerie glow of the Elder Scroll unfurled before him. The ancient relic hummed with power as it revealed its secrets, images flooding Arthur's mind faster than he could comprehend. He saw dragons soaring through ancient skies, heard words of power that shook mountains, and felt the crushing weight of destiny pressing down upon him. When the vision cleared, Arthur found himself staring into the ancient eyes of Parthenax. "You have seen it, Dovahkiin," the old dragon rumbled. "The time wound, the moment when the Elder Scroll was used to cast Alduin forward in time. I saw—" Arthur paused, struggling to put the overwhelming experience into words. "I saw how they tried to defeat him before with that shout, Dragonrend," Parthenax confirmed. "The shout created by mortals, fueled by their hatred of dragonkind. It forces dragons to experience mortality, a concept entirely alien and horrifying to an immortal Dova." Arthur's hand instinctively moved to his chest, where the phantom pain of tuberculosis sometimes still haunted him. "I reckon I understand mortality better than most." "Indeed, Dovahkiin, perhaps that is why destiny has chosen you for this task. You carry wisdom from another world." Parthenax extended his wings. "But now, prepare yourself. I sense him. Alduin approaches." The sky darkened suddenly as a massive shadow passed overhead. Arthur's hand dropped to his revolver out of instinct, but he knew bullets would do little against the World Eater. The black dragon descended with a roar that shook the mountain, his red eyes burning with ancient malice. "Bahlan Hokoron," Alduin's voice boomed across the peak. "My worthy prey awaits." Arthur squared his shoulders, meeting the dragon's gaze. "Been waiting on you, you ugly bastard. You are brave, Balan Hokoron, but your borrowed voice will not save you, Jor." Alduin circled overhead. "Your world is already lost." Arthur planted his feet firmly in the snow. The words of Dragonrend burned in his mind, alien yet somehow familiar. Drawing a deep breath, he shouted with all the force he could muster, "Jorzar Frul." The shout struck Alduin like a physical blow. The great dragon faltered mid-flight, his wings suddenly heavy. A blue aura enveloped his obsidian scales as he crashed onto the mountainside with a roar of pain and fury. "What have you done?" Alduin thrashed against the magic binding him. "What is this mortality you force upon me?" Arthur drew his enhanced dwarven pistol, loaded with Lydia's special ammunition. "Something I lived with every damn day." He fired, the enchanted bullet striking Alduin's flank with an explosion of fire and soul energy. The World Eater howled, more in outrage than pain. "You think your tinker toys can harm me? I am Alduin, firstborn of Akatosh." With unexpected speed, the dragon lunged forward, barely missing Arthur as he rolled aside. The battle began in earnest, with Arthur alternating between his firearms and shouts, while Alduin unleashed the full fury of his power. Meteors rained from the sky, turning the snow to steam and forcing Arthur to seek shelter behind rocky outcroppings. Parthenax joined the fray, exchanging fire breath with his dark brother while Arthur reloaded. "Use Dragonrend again," the old dragon called. "Keep him bound to Mundus." Arthur's throat burned from shouting, but he obeyed, hitting Alduin with another blast of Dragonrend just as the previous effect began to fade. The World Eater stumbled again, and Arthur seized the opportunity to empty his shotgun into the dragon's face. Black blood sizzled in the snow as Alduin reared back. For a moment, Arthur thought victory was within reach until the dragon's eyes focused on him with renewed hatred. "Enough!" Alduin roared. Zuu und Slad, I am eternal. With a powerful beat of his wings, Alduin rose into the air despite Dragonren's lingering effects. This is but a taste of what awaits you, Dovahkiin. Hunt me if you dare, in Sovngarde, where I feast on the souls of your fallen kin. A swirling vortex opened in the sky, as Alduin uttered words in the dragon language that even Arthur could not comprehend. Before anyone could act, the World Eater vanished into the portal. Silence fell over the mountain top, broken only by the howling wind and Arthur's labored breathing. He has fled to Sovngarde, Paarthurnax said gravely, the Nordic afterlife, where he feeds on the souls of the dead to regain his strength. Arthur holstered his weapons, wincing at the burns and cuts that covered his body from the battle. How in hell am I supposed to follow him there? I ain't exactly planning to die today. There is a way, Paarthurnax replied. But first you must secure the cooperation of those who once sought to destroy Alduin. You must broker a peace, however temporary, between the warring factions of Skyrim. Arthur laughed bitterly. Diplomacy ain't exactly my strong suit. Nevertheless, it must be done. Return to High Hrothgar. The Greybeards will guide your next steps. 2 weeks later, Arthur stood in the ancient stone fortress of Dragon's Reach, watching as the massive wooden mechanism of the great porch descended from the ceiling. Jarl Balgruuf stood nearby, clearly nervous about the plan they were about to execute. You're certain this trap will hold a dragon? Arthur asked, eyeing the enormous wooden yoke skeptically. It was designed for exactly that purpose, Balgruuf replied, though it hasn't been tested in, well, thousands of years. Reassuring, Arthur muttered. The Peace Council at High Hrothgar had been a trial of patience, unlike anything Arthur had experienced before. The Imperials and Stormcloaks had hurled accusations at one another while the Thalmor representatives smirked from the sidelines. It had reminded Arthur painfully of the petty feuds between the Greys and the Braithwaites, wealthy families too blinded by hatred to see the destruction they caused. In the end, Arthur had slammed his fist on the table and delivered a speech that would have made Dutch proud or perhaps horrified. He'd told them in no uncertain terms that their squabbles meant nothing if Alduin devoured the world, and that history would remember them as fools who fought over scraps while their world burned. Surprisingly, it had worked. A temporary truce had been negotiated, allowing Arthur to focus on the next step of his plan, capturing a dragon to learn how to reach Sovngarde. Now standing on the great porch with his enchanted weapons loaded, Arthur felt a familiar tension in his shoulders, the calm before the storm. I'll draw him in, Arthur said, checking his revolvers one last time. You just make sure that contraption works when the time comes. Balgruuf nodded grimly. May the gods watch over you, Dragonborn. Arthur stepped to the edge of the massive balcony and looked out over Whiterun. The city had become something of a home to him in these strange months. Bree's home stood among the other buildings, where Lydia was likely still working on new ammunition designs. She'd wanted to join him today, but Arthur had insisted she stay behind. This was his burden to bear. Taking a deep breath, Arthur focused on the name Paarthurnax had taught him, the name of a dragon who might be persuaded to help. Odiazing! His shout echoed across the plains, reverberating through the mountains in the distance. For several long moments nothing happened. Then a roar replied from somewhere far away, and a dark shape appeared in the sky, growing larger by the second. "Everyone ready!" Arthur called, drawing his weapons. "Here he comes!" The red dragon swooped down with frightening speed, hovering before the balcony with wings that stirred up a windstorm. "Dovahkiin!" Odahviing roared. "You dare summon me! You will pay for this insolence!" Arthur stood his ground, keeping the dragon's attention fixed on him. "I ain't afraid of you. Come and get me if you think you can." Enraged, Odahviing landed on the balcony and lunged forward, directly into the trap's path. Arthur rolled aside as the dragon's jaws snapped where he had stood a moment before. With a thunderous crash, the ancient mechanism deployed, catching Odahviing's neck in its wooden yoke. The dragon thrashed and roared, breathing fire that scorched the stone walls but did nothing to free him. "Treachery! Nivarine Jor!" "Settle down," Arthur approached cautiously, keeping out of range of the dragon's jaws. "I just want to talk." "Talk!" Odahviing ceased his struggling, fixing Arthur with an intelligent gaze. "Few mortals would dare trap a Dover for mere conversation." "I need to find Alduin," Arthur explained. "He's fled to Sovngarde." Odahviing's eyes narrowed. "Alduin has grown weak. He flees from the Dovahkiin rather than face your Thu'um." The dragon seemed to consider something before continuing. "Perhaps his dominion is not as certain as he believes. You questioning his leadership." Arthur recognized the political opportunity immediately. "Let us say, I have begun to question whether his path is truly the correct one." Odahviing lowered his voice. "Alduin has taken refuge in Skuldafn, an ancient temple high in the mountains. Only a dragon can reach it. And that's where I can find a portal to Sovngarde." "Yes, a portal created long ago, guarded by Alduin's most loyal servants." Arthur holstered his weapons and approached the trapped dragon. "So, if I release you, I will take you to Skuldafn in exchange for my freedom and recognition of my assistance when Alduin falls." Arthur recognized the political maneuvering. The dragon was hedging his bets, positioning himself for whatever came after Alduin's potential defeat. It reminded him of the careful calculations Hosea used to make when planning which way to direct the gang's fortunes. "Deal," Arthur said firmly, "but double-cross me and it'll be the last mistake you make." Skuldafn Temple stood as a monument to ancient dragon worship, its weathered stone corridors filled with draugr and dragon priests that fell before Arthur's determined advance. The journey on Odahviing's back had been terrifying, soaring higher than any man was meant to go, the ground so far below that towns looked like toys. Now, standing before the swirling vortex atop the temple, Arthur took a moment to check his gear one final time. He had come prepared for the fight of his life, enhanced dwarven firearms loaded with Lydia's special dragon-slaying ammunition, potions of healing and stamina, and enchanted armor crafted by the finest smiths in Whiterun. The portal pulsed with ethereal energy, swirling like the eye of a storm. Arthur thought of all the people he had met in this strange land, Lydia with her fierce loyalty, Balgrof's steadfast leadership, the Greybeard's quiet wisdom, and even Parthenax's ancient perspective. He thought, too, of those he had left behind in his own world, John, Sadie, Charles, and little Jack, who would be growing up without him. "One last ride," Arthur murmured to himself, echoing words from a life that now seemed as distant as a dream. With a deep breath, he stepped into the light. The transition was disorienting, a rush of color and sound, then profound silence. When Arthur's vision cleared, he found himself standing in a misty valley unlike anything he had seen before. The sky above was an impossible swirl of colors and light, while the valley itself was lush with spectral flora. This was Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, and somewhere within it, Alduin waited. Arthur made his way through the mist, guided by a distant melody. Eventually, the fog thinned to reveal a massive hall built of whalebone and timber, perched atop a hill and connected to the valley by a bridge made of the skeleton of some enormous beast. "The Hall of Valor," came a deep voice from nearby. Arthur turned to find a tall Nordic warrior watching him. "You must be Sun, the shield Thane Parthenax told me about." The imposing figure nodded. Few mortals walk these mists with breath still in their lungs. What brings you to Sovngarde, living one? I've come to kill Alduin, Arthur replied simply. Tsun's expression remained impassive. Noble quest, but none may enter the Hall of Valor without proving their worth. Face me in combat, mortal. Show me the strength of your thumb and your arm. Arthur had expected this challenge. Without hesitation, he dropped into a fighting stance, leaving his weapons holstered. This was a test of honor, not a battle to the death. The fight that followed was unlike any Arthur had experienced. Tsun moved with the speed and power of a god, his massive axe cleaving the air where Arthur had stood moments before. But Arthur had not survived Dutch's gang, Pinkertons, and countless bounty hunters by being slow. He dodged and weaved, landing punches that would have felled a normal man, but merely caused Tsun to grunt in acknowledgement. When the moment was right, Arthur unleashed his thum, Fusro Da. The force of his shout staggered even the godly guardian, pushing him back several steps. Tsun lowered his axe and laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "O worthy Thum, you may pass, Dragonborn." Arthur caught his breath, nodding respectfully to his opponent, before crossing the bone bridge toward the Hall of Valor. Inside he found the greatest heroes of Nordic legend, feasting, drinking, and telling tales of battle. Among them were 3 warriors who immediately approached him, the ancient tongues who had created Dragonrend and used the Elder Scroll against Alduin. "Dragonborn," Gormla Goldenhilt greeted him, her spectral form radiating power. "You come at last to join our hunt for Alduin. We have watched your progress," added Feldir the Old, a strange dragon born from a distant realm, yet worthy nonetheless. Arthur removed his hat respectfully. "I've come to finish what you started." "Then let us delay no longer," declared Hakon One-Eye, raising his ghostly axe. "Alduin feasts on souls lost in the mist. Together we can clear the fog with our thum and force him to battle." The 4 warriors left the hall, descending back into the valley, now thick with impenetrable mist. Arthur could hear distant roars and occasional screams as souls trapped in the fog fell victim to the World-Eater. Standing shoulder to shoulder with the ancient heroes, Arthur joined his voice with theirs. "Lok va kor!" Their combined shout cut through the mist like a knife, creating a clear path forward. Again and again they shouted, pushing back the fog, until finally a massive shadow appeared overhead. "Alduin!" Arthur roared, drawing his weapons. "Face me, you coward!" The World-Eater descended, his form even more terrible in this realm. His scales absorbed the ethereal light around them, and his eyes burned with the fury of 1,000 suns. "So you have followed me to Sovngarde, Jor." Alduin's voice shook the very foundations of the afterlife. "A mistake you will not live to regret." "I've had about enough of your talk," Arthur growled. "Let's finish this." The battle that followed would become legendary even in a realm built on legends. The ancient heroes fought with spectral weapons and powerful shouts, while Arthur combined the thum with his strange weapons from another world. Every time Alduin seemed to weaken, he would devour a nearby soul and regain his strength. Arthur quickly realized that conventional tactics would not win this fight. As Alduin rose into the air to avoid another blast of Dragonrend, Arthur holstered his pistols and closed his eyes, drawing on everything he had learned since arriving in Skyrim. In his mind's eye, he saw the faces of everyone he had failed in his former life, those he couldn't save, those he had wronged. He felt the weight of his sins and the light of his redemption. When he opened his eyes again, they blazed with newfound determination. "Jor za frul." The shout erupted from Arthur with unprecedented power, striking Alduin mid-flight and bringing him crashing to the ground. As the World Eater struggled against the concept of mortality forced upon him, Arthur approached, drawing a single dwarven pistol. "You cannot destroy me," Alduin snarled. "I am Alduin, firstborn of Akatosh. I am eternal." Arthur cocked his revolver. "Nothing's eternal. That's what being mortal teaches you." He fired 6 enchanted rounds in rapid succession, each bullet striking with the combined fury of Dwemer engineering and Nordic enchantment. Alduin roared in pain as scales shattered and ancient flesh tore. The 3 heroes seized the opportunity to unleash their most powerful attacks, their spectral weapons tearing into the weakened dragon. With a final defiant roar, Alduin reared up, his form beginning to fracture as golden light poured from the wounds in his obsidian hide. "This cannot be," the World Eater's voice faltered. "I am immortal. I am." His body exploded in a blinding flash, soul energy erupting skyward before dissipating across Sovngarde. Where the mighty dragon had stood, nothing remained. Arthur lowered his smoking pistol, his expression somber rather than triumphant. The ancient heroes approached, clapping him on the shoulders in celebration. "It is done," Gormley declared. "The World Eater is vanquished." But Feldir the Old studied Arthur's face carefully. "You do not rejoice, Dragonborn. Why?" Arthur holstered his weapon. "Just wondering what comes next." He looked around at the ethereal landscape of Sovngarde. "This ain't my world, and I reckon this ain't my afterlife either." "Perhaps not," Sun said, approaching from the bone bridge. "But you have earned the right to return to Nirn and live out whatever destiny still awaits you there. Or," the Guardian continued, "there is another path. One who has defeated Alduin might petition Akatosh himself for a different journey." Arthur considered this. In Skyrim he had found purpose, respect, even friendship, but it wasn't home. It never could be. The question was whether his old world still held anything for him, or if his story there was truly finished. "I need to go back," Arthur said finally. "Not to Skyrim, to my own world." Sun nodded solemnly. "Then I shall send you on your way, World Eater's bane. But know this, your deeds in Skyrim will never be forgotten, and your soul will always have a place in Sovngarde when your final hour comes." Before Arthur could respond, Sun raised his axe and shouted words in the dragon language that Arthur did not understand. Light engulfed him, and he felt himself being pulled across the boundaries between worlds. As Sovngarde faded from view, Arthur thought he heard Sun's voice one last time. "Return home with this blessing, Naldal Vus." The first sensation Arthur registered was the smell, pine trees and mountain air, but different from Skyrim's. Opening his eyes, he found himself lying on familiar ground near a stream in the mountains of Amberino. His old clothes had returned, weathered and worn, but his guns still bore the subtle dwarven modifications from Lydia's workshop. Rising slowly to his feet, Arthur looked around in wonder. Had any time passed here, or had he returned to the same moment he'd left? In the distance, he spotted a familiar horse grazing peacefully. His own Tennessee Walker, exactly where he'd left him. Arthur smiled, running a hand over his cleanly shaven face. The tuberculosis was gone. He could feel it in his clear lungs and steady heartbeat. Whatever magic had brought him back had healed him completely. Taking a deep breath of sweet, familiar air, Arthur whistled for his horse. He had people to find. John, Sadie, Charles. He had a boy named Jack who deserved to know his uncle Arthur hadn't abandoned him after all. And he had dragons in his soul now, power that this world had never known. What that meant for his future he couldn't say, but for the first time in a very long while, Arthur Morgan was genuinely curious to find out.